Thank you. Well, thanks so much for coming out for tonight's event, which I think most of you probably know is part of an ongoing series that PNP has devoted to exploring race in America. And what you glean from the panelists tonight, I hope, will be compelling and insightful, provocative, and hopefully will deepen your understanding of an issue that is as old as our country. You may not agree with everything you hear, but whatever your own views are, please keep in mind that our guest speakers are gracious enough to be here to share their opinions and help us enrich the discussion, and they deserve our utmost respect and appreciation. Just a word about the origins of our Race in America series. All the credit for this goes to our moderator, April Ryan, who will be out here in a second. In the fall of 2015, April had just appeared at Politics and Prose for an author event after the publication of her first book, which was called The Presidency in Black and White, which I hope some of you have read. It recounts her experiences covering 4 successive presidents as the Washington Bureau Chief for American Urban Radio. At the time, our country was reeling from a series of shootings of young black men at the hands of police officers in cities across the country. Unfortunately, that has not changed dramatically since then. But April suggested a panel about race in America. Not just one, but an ongoing discussion that would evolve as events unfolded in the public sphere. And so began a series featuring speakers that have included Donna Brazile, Governor Doug Wilder, Mary Frances Berry, Eddie Glaude Jr., Paul Butler, Wes Lowery, Jason Riley, and other expert commentators. Today, sadly, but arguably, we need these discussions even more urgently than before, living as we do in a political climate that is too often hyperbolic, mean-spirited, and hate-filled. But the good news is this: here we are, and this is our 8th panel discussion since 2015. April Ryan has moderated all of these events for us, and we couldn't do them without her. I should note that during this whole time, she's also continued to cover the White House and Washington politics and national politics, and has written 2 more books, At Mama's Knee and Under Fire, Reporting from the Front Lines of the Trump Presidency, which came out in 2018. And I'm sure many of you know and can remember a lot of the news coverage about this, but she has been the target of insults and demeaning comments from the sitting President of the United States. April's not in here now, but if she were standing right here, I would tell her. We know she will always, maybe she is there. Okay, I was going to say, we applaud you, we admire you, and we have your back. So, we're also honored that joining April tonight will be 2 women respected and admired in Washington and beyond for their exceptional work as public servants and for their successes also, and we love this about them, as best-selling authors. First, it's a pleasure to introduce my very old friend and former colleague, Ambassador Susan Rice. At Politics and Prose, we think of Susan as one of our own, not only because she wrote a terrific memoir published last year entitled Tough Love, My Story of Things Worth Fighting For, but we also lay claim to her because Susan grew up nearby, went to high school a few blocks down Wisconsin at one of those other schools, before moving on to Stanford and a Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford. After a few other professional gigs, she was back in town working in the Clinton administration, where she served at first on the National Security Council and then became the youngest regional assistant secretary at the State Department. When President Obama was elected, in 2008, Susan was named U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations and later served as the President's National Security Advisor. Today, she writes and speaks about foreign policy, diplomacy, and America's status in the world. And what an honor also to have with us tonight Valerie Jarrett, whose own excellent memoir, Finding My Voice, My Journey to the West Wing and the Path Forward, was published just shy of a year ago. I just want to announce now, and I just heard this from April before we came out here, that Valerie's going to be going out to Los Angeles tomorrow because her book has been nominated for an NAACP Image Award for outstanding literary work in the category of biography. Story of her childhood in Iran, England, and eventually Chicago, the challenges of being a single mother, her work in the political and public arenas, and her deep, abiding friendship with Barack and Michelle Obama. It's hard to think of another senior advisor in the Obama White House who was as important to the first couple as she was, or as humble about her role. Valerie was in charge of the offices of Public Engagement and Intergovernmental Affairs, and she also chaired the White House Council on Women and Girls. Like Susan, Valerie's a graduate of Stanford. She then earned a law degree at the University of Michigan, and from there immersed herself in government and politics and community building in Chicago, and the rest is history. Now, last thing I'll say is that if you've read April's books, or Susan's, or Valerie's, hopefully you've read all of them, and if you haven't, they're on sale right outside, and you can get them signed. But you will know that each of these women is skilled, smart, tough, candid, and compassionate. None of them shies away from hard topics or painful truths. No matter the circumstances that confront them, they live their lives with integrity, conviction, and an unwavering commitment to doing good in the world. How lucky are we to have all three of them with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming April Ryan, Susan Rice, and Valerie Rice.
Good evening.
Come on, you can do better than that. Good evening for this night of Black History Month. Right, that's what I'm talking about. Thank you so much for showing up and showing out tonight. Tonight is going to be an incredible night. These are two friends. These are two friends. These are two friends, decades old. And we're going to laugh, we're going to be serious, and we're going to unveil some things that I'm sure you never knew before. And we might even break some news. You see who I'm looking at?
April's determined.
First of all, before we start, I want to thank First Blood and Listen. Thank you. Please stand. Please stand. Be serious. And the reason why Black men and owners of politics and prose, they have taken on this tough topic of race. This is a centuries-old issue, and we've talked about it civilly. And we're not just talking about it, but we look for solutions. And I thank you for allowing us to have a platform to bring incredible people like the ones you have tonight to talk about this very tough issue that is beyond a heart issue and beyond an issue of laws. It's a real issue that we face today. And I also want to thank Sidwell Friends, and thank you, Susan, for saying we should go to Sidwell Friends.
Don't tell National Cathedral School.
Thank you, Sidwell Friends, for this awesome venue and this moment. And I want to thank, once again, all of you for being here. And just FYI, you are being filmed for C-SPAN. So you can watch yourself very soon. Yes, you can watch yourself very soon on C-SPAN. So I want to start with my dear friend, Susan Rice. Susan, how are you looking at me like that? Put the mic to your mouth. Okay. Okay. Well, I want to start with you. I want to start with your prologue in your book, and it was very profound to me. It says, reflecting on our current complex and disconcerting times, I recognize that many Americans are questioning our leadership role in the world. Many also doubt the relevance of the American dream to huge segments of our society who have been left behind and locked out of the kinds of privileges that I've been fortunate to enjoy. Talk to me about that. Why did you write it?
Well, my book, Tough Love, is in many ways a very personal story. And it begins with my parents and my grandparents, who in so many ways made me who I am. And I'm actually referring in that passage in part to my mother and her family. My mom was the daughter of immigrants who came from Jamaica to Portland, Maine in 1912. And like so many immigrants to this country, my grandfather was a janitor, my grandmother was a maid, they had no formal education. But they came here determined to try to give their children a better life and to get them educated and to put them on that staircase to the American dream. And my mother used to say, after becoming a very successful corporate executive, sitting on 11 publicly traded boards and 11. And as the mother of the Pell Grant program, you know, she used to say, not bad for a poor colored girl from Portland, Maine. And,
And explain the Pell Grant program.
well, the Pell Grant program, as many in this room will know, is the program, the government-established program that's enabled 80 million Americans to achieve a higher education. And my mom came from very humble beginnings. She and her brothers had to scrape and save, as my grandparents did, to get to college. In my mother's case, she almost didn't make it to the school she was admitted to, Radcliffe College, because her father, my grandpa, had a catastrophic accident. He fell down the elevator shaft at the music store where he was a janitor. He broke his back, and he was out of commission for a long time, and she was denied a scholarship from the state of Maine to go to Radcliffe because she was black. And ultimately, her high school principal went to bat for her, got her the scholarship, and she was able to attend. But her story, and my uncle's story, was a story of what education and the prospects of upward mobility in this country can bring. And so she really wanted to give those possibilities to as many other people as possible. And that's how she got passionate about higher education and access to higher education. She worked with Senator Claiborne Pell to get that program established and sustained it over many years. But when I say in the passage in the book that we all need to worry that that possibility, that dream of a better future may not be available to us, I think that's the moment we're in. But I also think that's the moment we have the ability to affect. And I talk in the book about how we all have agency and responsibility. We can't be passive bystanders. We've got to bend the arc of the moral universe towards justice. We can't expect that it's going to happen on its own. And I'm a great believer in the potential for all of us to do that. For all the stuff we've seen collectively, I think we got time for that. But the point is, we have the agency and we have to exercise it. And if we don't, other people will.
Valerie, Susan talks about determination. Chapter 1 of your book, it talks about the gift of freedom. And your parents had to do something different because of the uncomfortable history of racism in this nation. And talk to me about this gift, unwrap the gift of freedom, because it's a very different story that many of us have heard.
Well, first of all, good evening, everybody. I am just delighted to be back in D.C., my home away from home. And after having lived here for 11 years, it does feel very familiar. And looking around the room, I think about 11 years ago, I didn't know any of you, and now I know so many of you. So thanks for coming out tonight and spending some time with us. So what April's alluding to is my parents' decision to leave the country. And so my dad grew up here in Washington, D.C., product of Dunbar High School. I knew it. Howard undergrad. Howard Medical School. Howard Medical School.
Morgan State.
Try this one.
HBCU love if you don't know.
All right, I'm gonna try it a little softer, maybe that'll help. And my mom is from Chicago. Anyone from Chicago? Oh, come on, there must be somebody now. So Kelly's from Chicago. And they met when my father was doing his residency in Chicago and fell in love, got married, and moved to Denver when my dad was in the Army, in the medical unit in the Army doing research. And when he finished his term in the Army, he wanted to join a major medical teaching hospital in the United States and do research. And he could not find a job comparable to his white counterparts. And he looked high and low. He could have moved anywhere in the country. And so he and my mom, who were pretty adventurous in spirits, decided to look outside the country. And he landed a job offer in Shiraz, Iran. I know, exactly. And I will say at that time, the United States had very strong diplomatic relationships with the country of Iran and the Shah. And the Shah was very interested in expanding healthcare in Iran, and infrastructure, and really making Iran competitive, globally competitive. And so his Department of Health was recruiting physicians from all over the world to come and work with the Iranian doctors to start hospitals in parts of the country that were underserved. And so they offered my father the job to start a brand new hospital, the Namazi Hospital in Shiraz, and to chair the Department of Pathology, a job that was simply not available to him in this country. And my parents are a little crazy, I mean, I think they've been to Europe once before, and then off they go to a country where they really know nothing about the country. My grandparents, my mom's parents are like, where are you going? What you talking about? Are you kidding me? And off they went, and I was the second baby born in the Namazi Hospital. They practiced on some other poor child first. Not sure what happened there. And we lived there till I was 5. And then we moved back to the United States. And it was interesting to think about this era, the Jim Crow era, which is not that far removed in my parents' young adult life, where opportunities were simply not available here. And the courage it took for them to go halfway across the world. And from Iran, my father was recruited to go to the University College of London to do research. He continued the work that he started in Iran. And one day he was giving a speech at an international conference, and the dean of the University of Chicago Medical Center was at the conference and offered him a tenure-track position at the University of Chicago in the neighborhood where my grandmother and my aunts and uncles and extended family all lived. And so my dad used to say to me that sometimes the shortest distance to where you really want to go means you have to be prepared to take the long way around. And it was such a different experience, and when I moved to the United States, they were going home. But I was like, well, what about that neighborhood I was used to? And it was really a culture shock for me. But in my adult life, I began to appreciate how extraordinary it was to have this childhood that was so different and enriching and gave me a global perspective at a very early age and made me feel like I could walk in a room and talk to just about anybody, because I grew up in a hospital compound with kids from all over the world who spoke all different languages, and we found commonality. And it also gave me an appreciation for the United States that I think that oftentimes people who have not lived outside of the country don't have. Everything from our civil liberties to not having to boil your liquids and peel your foods, and this sense that the United States is an absolutely amazing country. It's actually not the only country in the world. And we can learn a great deal outside of our shores.
But the unfortunate thing is that because you were born in Iran, you had such a unique perspective on life. People are trying to throw that as a dark issue, as a negative. What say you about that?
What say me? Well, you know what? Look, people are going to say what they're going to say, right? And I think part of what you learn in public service, and I'm so fortunate to have started at the local level, and I'm a big believer in public service at the local level, where your constituents are proximate. I mean, they are in your face. They follow you to the grocery store, and the dry cleaner, and the park with your kids, and they lobby you, and they have your phone number, and it's 24/7, and that's actually as it should be. And you get used to people not trusting you and having to earn their trust, and to recognize that you do have to absorb a lot of pain, and that's just a small price to pay for the privilege of public service. And having learned that on the local level, and my cousin in-law, Kelly Dibble, is here. We worked together 30 years ago in the city of Chicago, and poor Kelly, we were talking at dinner, used to have to go to community meetings where everybody was screaming and yelling at her. And now the people who were screaming and yelling are dear friends of ours. Why? Because we took the time to really try to earn their trust. And I think when you look at the upside of driving around cities like Chicago, where we were able to make this huge impact today, all these many years later, compared to any amount of incoming that you have to take, it pales in comparison. It's worth any sacrifice for the privilege of serving.
Susan?
Well, I'm struck listening to Valerie tell her story, which you shared a bit between us, that our parents both, on both sides, had this drive and ambition and the belief that they had a potential that they must fulfill. And yet society at the time, for your dad and for my mom and dad as well, my mom, was doing everything they could to close doors. My dad was born in segregated South Carolina around 1920, in the heart of Jim Crow, at the height of lynching. And yet, he knew, as the son and the grandson, remarkably, of college-educated black men, including his grandfather who had been a slave, that he had the ability and the potential to be who he wanted to be. But the world was telling him he couldn't, and he mustn't. And he finally got his college education in New York at City College. He got his MBA, and then he was drafted into World War II, and he served at Tuskegee with the Tuskegee Airmen. And, you know, all of us now look back at Tuskegee and think, you know, what a wonderful example of African-American flying and fighting prowess. My dad resented mightily that notion that black people had anything to prove to white people. He thought it was absolutely offensive and ridiculous. And as much as he was a proud American, and he really was, to serve his country, he resented mightily that here he was, a black man with so many other talented African-American men, fighting for freedom for everybody but our own people. And he would try to go off base and get a meal, and he couldn't in the restaurants off the base in Alabama, and yet he'd see German POWs being served in those same restaurants. So he got out of the war, and he essentially escaped to California. And he's been told that, you know, out west there's more freedom with respect to race. He got his PhD in economics at Berkeley, and then when he got his PhD in 1955, he couldn't get a job. Same thing, couldn't get a job in California or anywhere on the West Coast in government or the private sector. And he tried to escape too, but he went to Cornell University in upstate New York, and he got a job there as an assistant professor. But only because they didn't know he was black until he showed up. And to Cornell's credit, they did not put him out. They let him stay, and that was the beginning of his career. But again, the same lessons of you gotta believe in yourself, and you can't let other people define you for you. And I think of the many things that we have in common was this gift from our parents to believe in ourselves. And as my dad used to say, to learn early not to take crap from other people. You know, if somebody's pushing you or bullying you or telling you you can't, or that you don't belong, you have to stand up and push back.
We've seen that recently.
Well, you know what?
Have you seen Twitter?
Before you go there, April, come on back, April. Before you go down that rabbit hole, as I was listening to Susan, and we know each other well. We've spent time talking about our families and reading each other's books. But it makes such a difference to have that kind of ancestry of people who did what everybody said was impossible. And so my story would be my great-grandfather was the first African-American to attend MIT in 1888. And what's interesting isn't so much that he went there, but that his father, who was born in North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, was born a slave. And his father, his grandfather, was the slave master. Had his kids, and because he was a slave master, he was pretty lenient with his son, the slave, and allowed him to work and make money. And then after the Civil War, my great-great-grandfather was freed and decided that the best thing for his son was to get a good education. And he started working as a carpenter, and he worked really hard and saved enough money to pay for his son's education to go to MIT. And I used to often think anytime something would go crazy and I feel like, oh my gosh, people are expecting less of me, I would think, well, what must that train ride have been like from Wilmington, North Carolina to Boston for my great-grandfather, and what must it have been like to be in an environment where I'm sure all of the other students have no exposure to black people other than serving them in their homes or seeing them working at a great distance, nothing close and proximate. And yet he did it, and he thrived, and he went on to design much of the Tuskegee University campus. And I think having people in your family who did what was seemed to be impossible, but did it with no edge, but just like grace and determination and commitment to not only do it, but then to open the door for the next generation of us is an amazing safety net for us both to have had. It makes it also a lot easier to take some unnecessary crap.
And you know, it's interesting listening to these great stories. I didn't grow up this way. I had two parents who come from families who were agrarians in Maryland and in North Carolina. And I was the second person in my family to attend college. My mother attended college, got her degree when I was a senior in high school. But the determination was still there. It was the determination for a better day for yourself and for your children. So the baseline of all of these stories is to take it further than you had. And that's why I love listening to stories. We all have a story. And I thank you for sharing it. Thank you for being open and honest about that. But I want to hit something that I can't help but think about. It's an honor to call both of you friends. But I watch you. I watch the work that you do. I watch the service that you give of yourselves. And sometimes you have to walk away from family and friends to do the work. You know, you sacrifice to work for people. And I think about what Shirley Chisholm said, being black and being a woman is a double whammy. And I think about how you're courted around the world. But now at home, sometimes you are attacked because of who you are and what administrations you have worked for. For you, I'm talking presidential administration, and for you, President Obama. Talk to me about what it's like right now for both of you, walking around this country and have served for President Obama, the first black president, and for some they call him the forever president. It's true. I'm starting with you. Yes. Okay. So that's what friends do. Get your phone for you.
You know, Valerie and I both have had the great privilege, particularly in the context of writing a book and going around the country and talking about it, to be in many different places, many different cities. And believe it or not, for all the vitriol that one might face on Twitter, in reality, people don't mess with you to your face. You know, people are either extraordinarily nice.
They're scared of Susan.
They don't mess with Susan.
I'm a little scared of Susan.
She was back there posting up. I was like, what?
Seriously, people are nice and they come up to you in airports and restaurants and everything else and they thank you for your service. And they mean it. And they say, you know, we wish you could come back and all this stuff. And once in a while you'll pass somebody who you can tell by their body language or the look they give you that they really don't like you. But you know what? They keep walking. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier. I think, at least in my case, I've had one person confront me in a hostile fashion in a public location, some old lady on the streets of New York. And that's it. And mostly people are appreciative. So I don't feel, you know, dogged in the macro sense. I feel really privileged to have been able to serve and work with wonderful colleagues like Valerie and others and work for President Obama. What a joy and a great honor every day. And, you know, we live in a very divided country. But one thing that gives me hope, and I talk about domestic divisions a fair bit in the book, and I talk about how I'm living with them in my family, where I've got children of starkly different political persuasions.
Really?
Yes, really. And yet, it gets all the way by to Thanksgiving. And Christmas. And every Sunday dinner in between.
It was common at Christmas party this year. It was common at Christmas party.
In public, my kids will act right. Actually, they're great, wonderful kids. One's a conservative, one's a very progressive, and we are dealing with that in our household. That's a bit of an aside, but what I find when I'm, out in the public and dealing with folks is to such a great extent that I think it's easy to forget if you're watching cable TV or you're on social media. At the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same things. We have the same aspirations. We want to be safe. We want to be with the people we love. We want to believe that we can have a better future. We want to get through the goddamn TSA line efficiently. That complicated.
I got clear. That's like the magic. Go through clear. Get through faster. We had to learn these things. Susan and I will tell you. Susan and I were in a bubble. And my daughter was like, as soon as we left, she said, Mom, you've got to figure out how to get through the airport. And I was like, I didn't know that cabs took credit cards. They didn't do that when I left. And then there was this, and there was all kinds of things I had to get used to. But to Susan's point, we talked about this earlier, in the 3 years since we left the administration, when I came out, I mean, honestly, you're used to being in a bubble and protected, safe, and then you're like thrown out. And it's like from 11:59 to 12 o'clock. You go from the bubble to, hey baby, you are on your own. And I was scared. I was scared because I thought, okay, well, there are all these people out there who didn't see the country the way I did. And how are they going to feel about me now that I'm out there with them? And I said, going through airports and all this stuff, I was nervous. And Susan and I compared notes earlier, and literally one person in 3 years to our face, and mine was a guy in the streets of D.C. And it was like out of nowhere, he just started yelling at me, and then he walked by, and I think he was probably yelling at everybody, but I took it kind of personally. But most people, there is this huge disconnect between social media, where there's this degree of anonymity, and therefore people can hide behind that and say things that they would never say to your face. And when you compare that to the people at the end of these plane rides who just express appreciation for our service and gratitude for President Obama and appreciation for what we try to do, it is a tale of two worlds. And so part of what I'm interested in doing, and why I think the book tour for both of us has been so enriching, is to try to connect the two and get the people who are just out there loving our country, trying to improve their neighborhood, not trying to solve world peace, but just trying to tutor a child, or volunteer at a block club, or get involved in their local faith-based institutions, and make change happen on the ground. And that is where the magic is. And so there's still great reason for optimism, notwithstanding this layer of toxicity that we see kind of at the national level and on social media. And I do think that that is the vast minority. I do think most people are good people who love their families and just want to, make enough money to live well, reasonably well, put food on the table, pay their rent, send their kids to college, hope for the kids to have a better life than they have, and retire with dignity. And that's kind of, in a sense, the American dream. They're not looking for that much. And I think their frustration is that they don't feel that people who are in positions of power to affect their lives are looking out for them. And that's where a lot of this anger comes from. It's like, well, what about me? Why aren't you looking out for me? So my experience traveling around this great country over the last few years has been really positive. And it gives me reason for optimism. The activism and engagement that I see on the ground is so much more powerful than whatever we see distantly removed on social media, or I don't want to say on cable because my daughter works for cable television.
CNN, you can watch her early in the morning, like 3 a.m.
4 a.m. 4 to 6.
I don't know.
4 to 6 a.m. on CNN.
It's early.
Then you come back here to Washington. And, we've got leaders that have created this mythology that we live in a zero-sum world. And that if I'm getting mine, that means you can't have yours. And they are trying to deny the commonality that we share and cause us to think that my success has to be your loss. Whether in terms of how we share the national pie and how we share the global pie. You know, this America First means if it's good for us, it's got to be bad for somebody else, even if they're our allies. It's a completely warped mindset that's politically expedient, but so destructive of our social compact and our national fabric. And one of the things that they both have found gratifying going around the country is that a reminder that it doesn't need to be this way, and that many people understand that we actually are in the same boat, even if we quite profoundly disagree.
Well, let's go back to social media, Twitter.
The Twitter.
The Twitter.
Come on, sweet.
Yes, you must, because both of you have addressed it in your book. Both of you have been publicly attacked on Twitter, from the highest office in the land. And by a certain person that we will not mention, and I know this one didn't say anything. I don't know if you probably, did you say anything?
What, when?
When a certain person went out on Twitter saying something, and then no one said anything.
Yes, well,
And then the show got the reboot.
when he came at me most recently, I put the book back up.
Oh, you
That
did?
gets to the story that I know you're going to try to get to. So Donald Trump, are we talking about Donald Trump?
Yes, we are. See, I work at the White House. I gotta go back every day. You know, you can sit there and say,
I go back.
let me tell you something. I've seen you back at the White House twice there. I've been there 23 years. Clinton, and now, yeah, so. No, I'm just making them.
So, anyway, so Donald Trump has referred to me on rare occasions on his Twitter feed, including early in the administration branding me a criminal. That was so preposterous and offensive and false that I didn't feel it necessary to dignify it with response. But more recently, when I was on a book tour, I went on Bill Maher, and I get off the set, and the producer, Bill Maher, says, "Did you see what President Trump tweeted?" I said, "Oh, no, I didn't see it. I was on television." And he shows me the tweet, and Trump's coming at me for being a terrible national security advisor and serving this terrible President Barack Obama and screwing everything up on Syria. And he just goes off on me. And so I said, okay, I'm out there. I'm here to talk about my book. So I responded right away on Twitter, "Mr. President, if that's what you thought, that I'm so terrible, then why did you come up to me in 2015?
Okay, we got
I'm
receipts
sorry,
on this.
at the White House Correspondents'
We
Dinner,
got receipts on this.
when I'd never met you before, and forced me into a grotesque hug, and whisper in my ear, while I'm National Security Advisor,
He was smiling.
that I had done a great job for the country and had been very unfairly treated over Benghazi, page whatever it was I wrote,
And there are pictures.
in Tough Love." And he didn't respond. And then a couple days later, I posted again on top of that, crickets, question mark.
Wait a minute. So after you said that, I came back and said, and there are receipts. There's a picture. And other people were posting pictures, but they didn't post a picture that I had. I took a
That's
picture,
because I'm ashamed of that picture.
but you got that picture. And then after he went to Susan, he trots over to Val and Jared. That's the same dinner, and I was trying to take pictures.
Verbatim, he said the exact same thing to both of us that night. We compared the
This is
two.
true. We have receipts there. There's a picture. There are several pictures. Am I lying?
No, you're not lying.
Thank you.
Let's move on, April. Let's go with something.
There's nothing fake here.
Dragging us into the mud.
Okay, so but it's in your book.
No, but
Okay, anyway, you know. So something that everyone wants to know. How are the Obamas doing?
You look at me. You know what? They're great personally. I mean, I think to have had the privilege of serving our country, for a guy who grew up with his mom, who was on food stamps for a while she was trying to get her education, single mom, and for Michelle Obama to have grown up on the south side of Chicago, working class family, parents didn't go to college, but instilled in her this sense of responsibility to give back. For them to have had the privilege of serving this country for not one, but 2 terms, the maximum you can serve, and to have not had any scandals on their watch. I think they're proud of their service. Look, is it troubling to see what's happened over the last few years? Sure. I think it is deeply and profoundly troubling to many of us, and they are no different in that respect. And I think the question, for example, Michelle Obama formed an organization called When We All Vote. I had the privilege of chairing the board of it, and it's nonpartisan, and it's all about trying to address the fact that we have a culture developing in our country where people don't accept their fundamental responsibility of citizenship, which is to vote. And that's the minimum responsibility to live in this great country, is that you have to vote. And so our goal is to try to change the culture, beginning with young people, because they're so much easier than older people. And evidence shows that people who vote in their first election tend to become lifelong voters. And so let's go after that market. And so I think for Michelle, it's that work, it's the work she's doing around girls' education, all the adolescent girls around the world who are in school, and we know how that affects their economic upward mobility. For President Obama, it's his foundation, where he's really trying to train the next generation of community organizers. And, you know, he tears up every single time he talks to young people. And he talks about how talented they are, how much more they have going for them, and their worldliness, and part of it is because of technology, and part of it is they're just smarter than we were. And to be able to give them the benefit of his years of experience and give them the tools that they need to go out and change the world is enormously gratifying. And I think the work that they're doing, the affirmative work that they're doing, gives them reason to be optimistic. But let's face it, we live in a time where the social norms, the protocols, the conventions that Susan and I lived under during our privilege of serving in the White House don't exist. Like the bumpers that kept us as a society with norms that were important, laws that are important, all of that seems to be at risk. And so I think that there's reason for us to all be worried, but the silver lining is if we feel empowered to do something about it. And I think for the 43% who didn't vote, I hope it was a wake-up call in the last election to say bad things happen when we don't engage. And the activism that we saw in the midterm elections, I think, gives everybody a sense of optimism, and the fact that, let's just say, am I happy that we have more women in Congress than ever before? You betcha. You betcha. And so that's the silver lining, is that we have to capitalize on that activism and try to get people energized. So their energy, I don't think is like wringing their hands watching what's happening on Twitter or on these little stations. It's really focusing on how do we build this next generation of citizens that accept their responsibilities and get engaged and own this country the way you do. If you really love it, that means you get to challenge it. That means you get to call it on the carpet when it's not right. That means that you have to use your voice to be an agent for change. And I think they're about creating the space for that to happen for the next generation.
Are you guys enjoying this conversation? So I want to hit on something, the divide in this nation. The divide in this nation. The divide in this nation. And you talked about it in your book. When there's a divide, like things that happen in Parkland, Charlottesville, when the nation is just split on these issues, it becomes a national security issue. Talk to us about that.
Well, I write in Tough Love, in the last chapter, which I call Bridging the Divide, that our domestic political divisions are, in my honest judgment, our greatest national security vulnerability. And yes, we have foreign adversaries and threats like terrorism, pandemics, and climate change. But our domestic political divisions are our greatest vulnerability, I think, in two broad respects. One, we are almost incapable of getting anything meaningfully done in this city for the American people. You know, take an issue as basic as infrastructure, which everybody says they're for upgrading and improving, laying broadband, you know, making sure our bridges don't collapse. And yet we cannot even begin to get it done. Meanwhile, we're trying to compete with China for global economic leadership in the 21st century, and we're crippled. But even more troubling is the reality that adversaries like Russia have figured out that they can achieve their objectives, which are to diminish us, weaken us, undermine the United States as a global power, but also democracy itself as a model, by exacerbating our domestic political divisions. So what the Russians are doing every day of every year, not just every 2 years when it comes to the elections, is they are playing on social media and through their propaganda organs like RT and Sputnik, which now apparently are broadcast on Kansas City radio. Yes. But they're on the social media on both sides of every divisive issue, whether it's race or immigration or gay rights, you name it. They're trying to cause Americans to fear and hate each other and discount facts and discredit our institutions and start doubting our very national enterprise. And they figured out that if they can exploit our divisions and take them to the extreme, that they can weaken and defeat us, ultimately, without ever firing a bullet. So this is what we're facing now as our greatest national challenge. The good news is that this is a problem of our own creation, and therefore it's within our capacity to address. The other piece of good news is that if you look back over the span of our history, domestic divisions have been a feature of that history forever. And yet we've overcome them and come through them, from the Civil War to Reconstruction, to the backlash to Reconstruction and 2 world wars, and McCarthyism and Vietnam and the Civil Rights Era and Watergate. Every one of those things, many of which were far more bloody and violent, we've been able to come through whole and arguably stronger. So what I argue is that we have to recognize this is a moment where all Americans need to realize that our enterprise is at risk, and we have a choice. We can either embrace the reality that we are in the same boat and we sink or swim together, which no question we do, or we can allow these divisions to be the death of us, like a flesh-eating disease that's sort of devouring us from within. And I believe in this country. I end my book with the statement that nobody's ever won by betting against the capacity of the United States to renew and grow and change. And they would be foolish to bet that now. So, but that means we all need to get busy and do all the things that Valerie said. We've got to be active participants. We've got to be the change. We've got to make it the mission of every one of us, particularly our young people, to organize, to raise funds, to support candidates, to run for office, to claim back our democracy at a moment when it's under extraordinary threat. I mean, never before, for all these moments of division, have we had a leader in the White House who literally thinks he's above the law, and that the institutions of the state are his to manipulate for his personal political benefit, or financial benefit, or just personal benefit? Hell no.
April, can I say one more thing on this? Because friends, right? So we can be real with you. So y'all have to get comfortable being a little uncomfortable. And one concern I have, and it's a real disadvantage to social media, and I'm speaking primarily to people who are 20, 30 years younger than I am, but many of you who grew up using these devices, you define your reality. You define who you follow, you define your friends, you define the information. You decide whether the information is accurate or inaccurate. It's you, the consumer, who are ill-equipped to do so, are making decisions that when I grew up, Walter Cronkite told me what was right and wrong, and he was always right. And that's the way it was, right? And I see you nodding, okay. But that's all changed now, and I worry deeply and profoundly that the soul of our democracy is based on empathy and being able to be our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper, which means you have to get outside of your own skin and be willing to look at the world through somebody else's. And the more insular we become, both domestically and internationally, the more we think that the problems around the world are not ours to solve and withdraw. I mean, this is would agree with me on this. Every big problem the world has requires cooperation of more than just one country. And that's why our foundation of allies who trust us and rely on our word and know that we have their back, that is so important. I think about something like Ebola, which we were able to tackle, not by the United States alone, but by global cooperation. Or the Iran deal, where people think it was the United States and Iran. No. Russia, China, Great Britain, Germany, the European Union, all those world, France, all those world leaders signed on to the Iran deal. This is how we solve big problems. But if we think we can go it by ourselves, and that we can live in this little bubble, and stay safe and comfortable, and not empathetic, then I think that is what worries me about the soul of our country. And so I encourage us to encourage the younger generation to put down the phone from time to time and actually talk to somebody. I mean, my younger cousins talk to me about ghosting. April, you probably hear about this from your girls. You know what ghosting is? How many of you know what ghosting is? All right, right? Well, don't do that. It's not nice. I'm going to show you what it is, because they're not everybody. Those of you who don't know, I'll give you an example. Anne and Kelly, one of our younger cousins, told me about a friend of his who met somebody on social media. Okay, stop right there, but he did. Went on a date, went to dinner. He did not think the woman was particularly nice, and at the end of the first course, he gets up and he says, "Excuse me, I'm going to the men's room." Here it is, right? The lady's mortified. He paid the bill, and he left. And I say to my cousin, "That's outrageous." He goes, "Well, he paid the bill." I'm like, no, that's not good enough. You can't just walk away. And I think so often we're taking, I mean, I say it in a funny way, although it's deeply troubling. I mean, imagine the server came over to the table and said, "I'm sorry, the guy left." How embarrassing is that? And so we have to equip.
Not a contender.
No, but we really do have to think about how we're helping the next generation develop meaningful, deep relationships that are uncomfortable and difficult, and it's where we learn empathy. And I think empathy is a part of the soul of our country.
So Dr. King said, make the comfortable uncomfortable. And the late great Shirley Chisholm, who was there before Kamala and Carol Moseley Braun, she said, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. So with that said, the stakes are so high right now. The stakes are incredibly high right now. Did you watch last night's debate? Good water, isn't it, Valerie?
Delicious.
Go ahead.
So the answer for me is no, I didn't get to watch
Why not,
most of
Susan?
last night's debate because I was on stage myself
With?
John Bolton at Vanderbilt University.
Last night.
Last night.
Tell us about last night. What can you tell us?
First of all, despite the fact that I came to the UN after John Bolton and John Bolton came to the NSC after me, as far as I was concerned, we'd never met before. We spoke once on the phone, which she revealed last night. I hadn't busted him for that in public. But he did reach out to me before taking the National Security Advisor job. And he also reminded me that actually we had met before, many years ago when I was Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, and he was one of 9 people on a Religious Freedom Commission that came to meet me. He said,
During the Clinton years.
In the Clinton years, he said, I didn't say anything, so you wouldn't remember me. I was like, you're damn right I didn't remember. But anyway, so not really having properly met before, here we are on stage for the first time, in the middle of all this. And I have to say, it was a remarkably civil conversation. I had expected it to be a lot more scratchy than it turned out to be. But
I think you were a little scratchy.
I wasn't
From what I heard.
No, I was not
Okay,
scratchy.
tell them what you said, let them decide.
So the question came to each of us, what are the national security implications of what happened with Ukraine? We went through all that, you all know the story. This is Washington, I don't have to.
But no, but you
But hold up.
because it's beyond Washington.
All right. Well, no, but you didn't want to take it.
Okay, go ahead. So now-
I guess the short version is the president used congressionally appropriated military aid and a White House visit to extort bogus dirt from a foreign government to use against his domestic political opponent, entirely for his personal political gain. The poster child for abuse of power. And they covered it up, aided and abetted by Republicans in Congress who decided that Congress need not ever again have any effective oversight of the executive branch. That's the short version. And then you get into all the ways in which it weakened Ukraine, benefited Russia, undermined our global leadership, caused our allies to think we lost our mind, and given everybody around the world a license to manipulate the United States by being willing to do what Fiona Hill aptly called domestic political errands for this president. That's the problem. And then the question came to, well, to Bolton, you know, tell us what you think about impeachment and what you have to say, since everybody in the country is eager to know what you actually believe about this and what you've written. And I won't characterize Bolton's comments, you can look them up, but essentially he said, you know, that he was substantially constrained from speaking in public about what he knew because his book was going through the pre-clearance process for classification review at the White House.
And then you said?
And he went, you know, and he said that, you know, we actually had very interesting, I didn't mention this earlier, he had interesting perspective that the House practiced, the House impeachment was impeachment malpractice because they hadn't orchestrated it properly, which elicited some audible sounds from the audience. Anyway, I'm not going to characterize. So then they came to me and they said, well, what do you think? And I said, honestly, and, you know, he's sitting right here, that, you know, I've thought a lot about what I would have done having served in the same role if that had been me in that situation.
What would you have done? What did you say?
What I said was, honestly, it's inconceivable to me that if I had firsthand knowledge of a gross abuse of power by the president, then I would withhold testimony from a constitutionally authorized and a process of accountability. I couldn't do that. And then I said that, you know, especially if my subordinates had been doing their duty, responding to their legal obligations, and then were dragged by the president publicly their careers ruined, their security threatened, how can I sit here and say I can't say anything? Or at least exercise my First Amendment rights to speak in public, when it mattered. And I wasn't going, I was saying what I would have done. And that's really what I would have done. And I also made the point, just one couple more things.
I told you.
They wouldn't have taken a subpoena from me. And I explained, when I was the city national security advisor in early 2016, the House Select Committee on Benghazi, chaired by none other than Trey Gowdy, with Mike Pompeo and Jim Jordan on the committee, demanded, hold up, called me to testify before their 7th investigation on Benghazi. And I, as National Security Advisor, dealing with all these issues of the day, the last thing I wanted to do was to take days out of my schedule to go back and prepare to testify about something that happened 4 years before. But I did it. And I spent over 4 hours in front of those folks, voluntarily. And President Obama...
So did Obama exercise executive privilege and
Obama
say
didn't
you should not to speak?
No executive privilege, no immunity. He said, go do it, damn it. That's your job. And that's what we owe the American people in Congress.
So wait a minute, so it's about the Constitution and the people, not the president?
Yes! We all swear an oath to support and to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
So Valerie and Susan, can you say, and you worked in 2 administrations, the Clinton administration as well as the Obama administration, you worked in the Obama administration, both of you, and you're the president. I mean, you guys were his back, his front and his side, but you were all over the place. You protected any kind of way.
Both, please.
Yeah. So, but here's what I'm going to ask you. We are watching something so different. Tell us, do you see any similarities, or is this just extremely different? Is it a polar opposite of what you have seen in prior administrations versus this administration?
I've never seen anything like this.
Look, I can only speak to one administration, and I don't have any insight into the internal workings of the White House, because I will say, until you're there, living it and breathing it every day, you don't know. What I can say to you is that President Obama was very big on the rule of law. He was very big on coloring relevant lines. He was very big on the rigor process and the importance of ensuring that he made informed, analytical, evidence-based decisions that had been well-researched, and that he really depended upon his team to work as a team, where we weren't worried about what we were saying about each other in the press, we were worrying about getting to the right answer for you, the American people. And that the process that he insisted upon was designed to make sure that when it came to him, it was in a form where he could make the most informed decision possible. And that those decisions were not based on his short-term political interests. And I can give you a gazillion examples of where, let's begin with the Affordable Care Act, which was not popular when we were working on passing it, but the only reason it's the law of the land today is because you, the American people, said, do not take it away from me. But at the time he did it, there was enormous headwinds against it. And there were a lot of advisors who said to him, oh, Mr. President, just do children, don't do anything, let it go, do it in your second term, don't burn through your political capital. And he said, what's the point of being here? Unless you do what's going to actually be impactful to the quality of lives of the American people.
And weren't there about 90 or 99 amendments from Republicans?
200 amendments from the Republicans, an entire summer that we spent trying to find one single Republican to sign on board. And it was modeled in its inception after what Governor Romney did in Massachusetts. So it started out bipartisan. We didn't start out with Medicare for all. We didn't start out with the public option. We started out with what Governor Romney did in Massachusetts. It was, and improved upon that. And so I think the point here is that you really have to remember why you're there. And he never lost sight of that. And I worry that in this atmosphere, where it feels as though everything centers around the sensitivity of one person, and that the normal checks and balances, which we have, and look, we had as many of checks and balances from our own party in the House and the Senate, frankly, than we did from anyone else, and that's as it should be. They're independent branches of government. They're supposed to provide a check and balance. And when we start eroding those normal conventions, where judges are being intimidated, when career prosecutors who work for the federal government and independent agency in the Justice Department are being intimidated, well then, what really distinguishes us from the countries that we have been so critical of? And if we're going to lead by example, then we darn sure better lead by example.
Beautiful and diplomatic.
I'm the diplomat.
Yes, you do.
Oh, and one last question before I go to questions. Thank you guys so much. This has been so informative. Everyone has a story, and you guys have given so much of yourselves and your stories. I want to thank you for that. But I want to ask both of you. There is a new DNI coming up who has no clue of intelligence. Come on, Valerie, turn back around. I know she was it. That was the amen for the I heard, we heard you.
We haven't given you enough attention over here.
Susan, and I know this is your baby. Intelligence is your baby. You know it worldwide. Talk to me. What are your thoughts about that? I'm trying to think about what to say. Diplomatic.
The problem is not just that Rick Grinnell has absolutely no preparation, no background, no knowledge to be the DNI, which is supposed to be a position which was established after 9/11 to ensure that our intelligence agencies are aligned and coordinated and providing unvarnished, faithful truth to power. The problem is that Rick Grinnell is one of the most nasty, dishonest people I've ever encountered. I'm not using this language lightly. He is a hack and a shill, and that's all he's ever been. Going back to the time when he was the spokesman at the U.S. mission to the United Nations in the Bush administration. And as soon as the Bush administration ended, I had firsthand experience of him, when I became UN ambassador, spending more time than there seemed to be hours in a day, attacking me in a very nasty, vicious, ad hominem, I would even say misogynist way, about every aspect of who I was and my effort to serve as our ambassador to the United Nations. He continued throughout my 4.5 years and then turned the same vitriol on my successor, Samantha Power. And under President Trump, he has been the greatest champion of anything that is politically expedient for the president, however detrimental to our national interests. He's downplayed the Russian role in interfering in our elections. He's tried personally to sabotage one of our most important bilateral relationships with Germany. And he has been put in that job for one reason only, which is to turn the intelligence community into a tool for the president's re-election. The intelligence community is not going to perform that function because they're patriots and professionals. But the tension it's going to cause and the witch hunts, to use a familiar term, that I believe will be launched are going to be something to behold. And we all ought to be very mindful of what this represents.
Well, I don't know about you, but I want the intelligence community waking up every single day thinking about one thing and one thing only, and that is keeping America safe. And anything that we introduce into that equation that disrupts that focus, that creates tension, we don't need any tension. We need them all cooperating and agreeing together and working together not clouded by a political patina. This is supposed to be removed from politics. This is about just keeping us safe. And I think it gets back to the point I was making earlier, that when the Justice Department and when our intelligence agencies are infected with politics, it diminishes their core mission, which is about us. And that should be concerning to each and every one of us. But the good news is this: you guys get to do something about it. I always say that we have the government that we deserve. And if we don't like the way it is, then we have a choice in the matter. And shame on us if we do not exercise our power to influence and hold our elected officials accountable. And it begins with voting. But after they're elected, we have to hold them accountable. And I'll go back one last time just to the ACA. If it had not been for the American people showing up at the town halls before the midterm elections, when all of the gazillions of times that the Republicans tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and when the American people showed up and said, wait a minute, I have a pre-existing condition. I have a child who's in college and I want them on my plan. I'm a woman who wants to be sure that I can get health care and all of my preventive services without a copay. I'm a senior citizen and I can't afford these prescription drugs. I don't want to hit lifetime caps just when I need my insurance the most. When those folks showed up at town hall meetings, does anybody hear anything about repealing the Affordable Care Act? No, other than the fact that the Trump administration is in court trying to repeal it right now. But the members of Congress who represent you, crickets, because of you.
Drop the mic. All right. Drop the mic for both of them. All right, let's go to questions. As prominent figures in our country, how do you stay connected with the everyday struggles of African Americans?
You live it every day. When you're the parent or the grandparent of black kids in this country, even if you're temporarily living in a bubble, you can't separate yourself from the reality that it's still not right. And, you know, your son or nephew or whatever it may be still has to fear driving on these streets, walking down the streets. So those connections remain, and then there's the beauty, the joys. Like, we have family, we have community, we have history, we have a proud legacy that we have to uphold, and we've got champions that remind us every day, whether John Lewis or Barack Obama or many, many others, that our work is not done. And that when we join together and bring others with us and recognize, as I said earlier, that this is not a zero-sum equation, that we're all in it together, we can see a better world. We can see the promised land. We just have to not give up on that belief and commitment. And we've got to be there for each other. And one of the things I love about tonight, but also that I loved about the privilege we had of serving together, is that, you know, the three of us and our experiences behind the scenes, we all had each other's backs.
Yeah, we did.
And, you know, we don't need to put it all out on the street, but I can enumerate countless times when, if Valerie Jarrett hadn't been on the other side of the phone or down the hallway, when I needed it most, I don't know what I would have done. And April, right back at you. Same with you. And when folks have come at you and folks have come at me, I've always known you're in my corner.
I'll
And-
text you or call you.
Right?
I know she's got this, but just saying, right.
And that's just, you know, on a micro level, indicative of the kind of community and support we have to provide each other.
And before Valerie gets into her thing, I want to share something. Valerie talks in her book, Finding My Voice, about how you're not, she says, don't ever cry. And there's a story in there about her crying and about her life, the twists and turns she had to make about her life early on. you know how you plot your course. And and I read the book, I said, wait a minute. But there was a time, and I'm gonna say it. The day that Sean Spicer told me to stop shaking my head, I was gonna leave the White House. And Valerie called me, she said, sweetie, you okay? And I was like, no, and I was crying. She said, don't you let them see you cry. I told her, it's the truth though. And
Don't you ever walk out that White House unless and until you're ready.
But I think the point you're both making, which is a really important one, is that you cannot do this, and not just the jobs that we have, but frankly, life, without people in your life who look out for you and who love you and who pick you up. And you know, all of us have had those friends who are like nice, nasty, right? They were really, right? You know what I'm talking
I
about.
don't have friends like that anymore.
No, but you know what? You gotta let them go, because you just need people who will allow you to be yourself and rejuvenate, and you can close the door and cry. You can cry on the phone with me, but I did not want them to know that they were getting to you. And the only way that you can kind of like rise to the occasion is if people have the wind at your back. And that's what we can do for one another. It doesn't cost anything. It just is like a simple phone call. And you don't know how much those phone calls mean to people who are in these positions and who are under fire.
Thank you for the shameless plug.
We didn't talk about Angie's book, so.
All right, so, and do you want to talk about the everyday struggles of African Americans?
Look, they're real. They're real. And I think the fact of the matter is that we have not come to grips in this country with ways of leveling the playing field. And we, for reasons I still don't understand, don't appreciate the fact that we are better when everybody is able to compete on that even playing field. And does it require some money and some investment in the short term? Yeah, absolutely it does. But if we had the best world-class public education system in the world, we wouldn't be having a hard time competing against China or any other country, because we already have the most creative and the best universities in the world, and people come from all over the world to go to our universities, and then what do? We send them back home. We don't let them become citizens. They take the talent that they learned here, and they go back home. So what if we were to just say from age 0 through 12th grade, we were going to make sure every single person has the skill they need to compete in the global marketplace. African Americans will do a lot better.
As Black women, which Democratic candidate speaks most to your concerns? Okay.
You know, I'll give a short answer. I'll let Susan think about a longer answer. Anybody who emerges as a nominee is going to be so much better than the person we have today. I'll take any of them. Nobody's perfect. Look, none of us are perfect. Those of you who are in relationships, is your spouse, is your partner perfect? No. I think don't compare the nominees or the candidates to perfection. Compare them to the alternative.
We need to win. We need to win.
This is our style difference.
And to win, we need to bring the largest collection of Americans together. All right? So whoever can win is whoever's best for Black America. Let's be honest. That's just basic.
I don't know about
No, I'm sorry. Because we know Donald Trump is not what we need. He's got 4 years to go. I said it. I said it again. No, what is going on with you with the internet? That's when I'm on my good behavior.
I know.
So we need to win, and we need a nominee who can not only unite the party, but unite a broad cross-section of Democrats, independents, frustrated Republicans, and provide a vision and a leadership that's inclusive. and I'll be for whoever can do that. And yes, I'll be for the Democratic nominee, absolutely. But I'd like it to be a Democratic nominee who can win.
What inspired each of you to write your books, and what message do you hope they send? Valerie?
Well, my daughter inspired me to write the book. She interviewed me for StoryCorps. Many of you might know StoryCorps, oral history. And the first question she asked me is, what would you tell a 30-year-old Valerie Jarrett? She was 30 at the time, but we did the interview. And I started answering the question. I was like, well, I have a lot to say to a 30-year-old Valerie Jarrett. And I wish I had known when I was 30. And so I started really thinking about that cohort, that age group. But then the more I got into it, I realized that in order to understand a 30-year-old Valerie Jarrett and some of the dumb decisions I made at that age, you actually had to get to know a 5-year-old Valerie Jarrett and a 10-year-old Valerie Jarrett. And the next thing you know, you're telling the whole story. And what I'm hoping is that by being very open and honest about my life, and I think, I know Susan would agree with this, that people tend to see, I don't want to say the finished product because we're still a work in process, but people see us from these lofty perches that we had the privilege of serving, and they think, oh, well, it was easy, or you were born that way, and it was, there wasn't an evolution. And in my case, there was a very serious evolution, and it was a circuitous path. The adventure began when I got off the straight line, when I realized that the swerve is where you're listening to your own heart, the quiet voice inside of you, and not necessarily what everyone else is telling you to do. And what I hoped is that by sharing that story and people could see the trajectory, which in retrospect makes perfectly good sense, but at the time, each chapter I thought was chaos as I was going through them. And I felt like I felt like when it was hard, it must have just been hard for me. And I didn't realize, oh no, there are some structural and cultural challenges that make it hard for working families, particularly single working moms. Even ones like I had all of the advantages you could hope for: a good job, great health insurance, great daycare, wonderful supportive parents, and I still was holding on by my fingertips. And so I used to wonder, well, how bad must it be for those working families who don't have any of that safety net? And so I hope sharing this story, it would help folks find the power in their own voices and learn to trust the most important one, and that's the quiet one inside of each of us. And so I thought I would share the story in hopes it makes somebody's life a little bit easier.
I might have felt ready to write a book when I was 70, 75, looking back, except for the fact that when I was serving in government and had the experience of becoming the poster child of mendacity following Benghazi, I was in a very difficult situation of having the privilege to continue to serve and speak on behalf of the United States, the United Nations, or on behalf of our president. But in those roles, whether it's UN ambassador or national security advisor, you're not speaking for yourself. You can't respond to the characterizations and mischaracterizations and the dueling narratives: I'm a victim, I'm a villain, I'm a heroine, all this stuff that bore absolutely no relationship to who I am, or where I come from, or what motivates me. And so when I left government, I really wanted finally to be able to tell my own story in my own voice, and not allow a phenomenon to continue that my wonderful father always told me not to ever let happen. Don't let anybody else define you for you, or tell your story. And I recognize that part of serving required me to do that for a period of time, but I didn't want to do it forever. And then as I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to tell my story, I had to tell my whole story as truthfully and sometimes brutally as I could, to be honest to myself and honest to the reader. And I go back to my parents and my grandparents and my childhood here in Washington, D.C., and the ugliness of my parents' very public divorce here, and how that shaped me, and the challenges that I faced as a result of that in relationships, in marriage, in motherhood. I speak very forthrightly about my kids and some of their challenges, health-wise, the politics in our family, all of that stuff, as well as my story as a foreign policy person and how I came to be that, and the mistakes I made, and the lessons I learned, and where I think I screwed up, and where I think I got it right. And I wrote all of that, and I thought back on it, and I realized that between the lessons of my parents and my grandparents, my upbringing here, my service in 2 administrations, I learned some things that actually I thought could be very valuable to other people. And so at the end of the day, I hope my story is one that can be beneficial to anyone who wants to compete and thrive in unforgiving environments. And if they've been knocked down, to get back up.
Amen. Fall down, pick it up. I mean, it's a gospel song. I felt what is it, Donnie was lurking, okay. So, you've been hearing my phone drop, and my phone is my timer. And the unfortunate thing is I can talk forever, and I can listen to your wisdom forever. I adore you, not just that, you have been at the seat of powers. You have turned the neck of a president. You had his ear. And I don't think of any better women to sit here and talk about the issues of our nation and the issues of our culture. But there's one thing that we didn't talk about, and I know it's very dear to both of you. All 3 of us actually, we are women. We are women, and next month is Women's History Month. And being a woman means a lot, especially in this climate. And I want to ask you that about women today, and then I want to go into solutions from you, both of you, for tomorrow. Yeah, let's start with that. We ain't up on that.
I like being a woman, a lot. And I think that our society can make it a little bit easier on us all. We still have a heavier burden to carry, and some of it's on us to speak up and let people know how hard it is, because I don't know about you all, but when I was first coming out of law school practicing law, I tried to pretend that nothing was happening outside of work. I tried to compartmentalize, and I think that was not the right thing to do. I think it's upon us to help educate men, because men are part of the solution for gender equity. And when you talk about being a woman, I know you're talking about how we do level that playing field and make sure that, that we have every advantage that anybody else has. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at your 2 daughters, April, I want to just tear up because I remember them. I know, I'm sorry for embarrassing them. You knew it was coming at some point. When I first met them, it was, my gosh, it was 11 years ago, and they were just wee bitty things. And to see them grow up, I want for them to be able to achieve their absolute biggest dream, not shackled by our reality or our parents' reality, but free to discover their own. And that does take all of us. It takes women and men to really help create that level playing field so that we can achieve everything we want to achieve. One of the organizations that I launched after we left the White House is called the United States of Women. And it's all about discovering evidence-based practices that lead to gender equity. And some of them are as simple as equal pay and paid leave and paid sick days and workplace flexibility and a culture free from sexual harassment. And some of it is getting rid of the biases that keep women from getting the promotions that they deserve in the workplace. And some of it is just trying to recognize that we do not actually have to be perfect, for example, to be good mothers. I don't know about some of you mothers in this room, but I used to make baby food from scratch. Any of you do that? Don't do that. You don't have time for that. You don't have time for that.
Need time.
Well, but you know what? I think we guilt each other, April, oftentimes to make us feel unworthy because we aren't living up to some crazy, unrealistic expectation of what being a woman actually means. And my daughter gave me the best gift. Well, the best gift is I'm not a grandparent, and that's as good as it gets. But
She's big.
cute little boy, adorable little boy. But when I first released my book, when my daughter came on tour with me, and she and I were interviewed, and somebody said to her, what did you learn about your mother in the book that you didn't know? And she said, I had no idea how guilty she felt. And she said, I don't know why. She said, she was a great mom. And she was a role model for me of a working mom. And I am now going to be a working mom. And what greater gift is it of that? And I thought about it. She used to write me these notes, Mom, please come home. I miss you desperately. Why do you go to work every day? And I would read the note in the office and I would cry and I would be so miserable. And so I think part of what we as women have to do is to recognize that we're actually just fine the way we are, and we need to stop trying to be perfect. Just be human and love your children.
That's a fine idea. Yes, Ambassador, National Security Advisor, yes.
Well, I agree with everything Valerie just said, of course, and I would only add that apart from loving being a woman, I think women have a certain superpower.
Preach. Preach your queen.
And if you have it, you know what I'm talking about, and if you don't, I can't help you. But one of my dear friends and mentors, Madeleine Albright, has an expression that has at times been misconstrued, but it's an important one. And she likes to say, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. And that does not mean, as some have suggested, that women only can vote for women. That's not the point. The point is that our experiences are in many ways unique, and we need to be willing to help each other, to provide support, to provide wisdom, to babysit each other's kids. Stop it! To pick up April's stuff every day. Now I'm holding on to it because she... We gotta be there for each other. And I feel so blessed that I've had friends and colleagues and family members who've modeled that every step of the way. Now, I write in the book about the extraordinary experience of being National Security Advisor at the end of the Obama administration, when all of the senior leadership on national security were women. Deputy National Security Advisor, the Assistant to the President for Counterterrorism and Homeland Security, the Chief of Staff of the National Security Council. We had two men, also critical members of the team, Ben Rhodes and Wally Adeyemo, but they were such close friends and partners that we called them honorary girls. But it was really a different experience to lead in a pressure-ridden environment in a male-dominated field where most of our counterparts were men, and to do it knowing that we had each other's backs. We disagreed. We had our internal issues over policy or personnel, but God helped the man who tried to create divisions among us and pit us against each other. We circled the wagons, and they did not have a chance. And that kind of cohesion, that kind of also, I hope, sensitivity and caring for the personal circumstances of the people on our extended team, the recognition that, we all are human beings with lives and families have to come first, and if they don't, none of us are going to do our jobs optimally. Thankfully, we had a leader in President Obama who made that clear as his expectation from the top down, that we had to have each other's backs, that when and if circumstances required, if my mother was in the hospital as she was, and my dad, who passed when I was UN ambassador, my mom passed at the end of the Obama administration, or if our kids needed something, we were supposed to be there. The Vice President of the United States was supposed to be at the bedside of his son with brain cancer. We all still did our jobs. We did it to the best of our abilities, but we also had teammates who came and circled the wagons, and that was Obama's leadership that made that not just permissible, but the expectation. That kind of caring, which I think is a hallmark of women's leadership, but it's not exclusive to women, obviously, is the kind of mutual support that we all need to provide each other, men and women. But I also think that women need to understand that we have to lift each other up. And, you know, women of color and white women and all of us have to be in this together. It's not good enough for one section of us to advance and the rest of us to fall behind. We're all in it together.
I think the point that Susan just made is such an important one for all of you to take away, and I would say it's about creating the kind of a community where everybody can thrive. And in the beginning of the White House, some of the women's voices were shrinking a bit. And then we started hanging out with each other, and we would go to dinner, we would talk about our family and children, challenges, and we got to know one another. And when you walk into a meeting and you see somebody who you just had dinner with the night before, and you know they're going to have your back because you now have a relationship with them, not just a work relationship where you respect their work product, but a human relationship, it makes a big difference. And I commend that you all think about in your lives how to make space and open up your heart to really develop these relationships. And a reporter asked President Obama at the end of his first term in office how he compared his management style in the very beginning to the end of the term. He said, you know what, in the beginning, I mean, keep in mind, we had 2 wars, we had an economic crisis, the banks were on the verge of collapse, we were losing millions of jobs, millions of people were losing their homes, the automobile industry was in the tank, you keep going. He said, I wanted to have the best players on the field, and I went around the country and I found absolutely the smartest, best people. He said, at the end of the first term, I had the best team. And that team depends on trust. And trust only happens if you make yourself open and vulnerable and honest with people so that they can feel invested in you and want to have your back. I mean, having your back is not just a science or a requirement, it's a human emotion. And it makes not just work, but life a lot more enjoyable.
Solutions. Solutions for moving forward.
Good night's sleep.
This has been an incredible one. I'm talking about solutions overall. You know, we are in Black History Month. We are talking about race in America, but also just America coming together and coming to grips with an ugly past, an ugly present, and how
To me, it goes back to the thing I've been hitting on all night, which is that we've got to realize that it's not my gain is your loss and vice versa. That we need to be willing to know each other and understand each other, and despite our differences, respect each other. And get out of our close-knit, communities where, within our same zip codes, we tend to have a high degree of common experience and a high degree of political alignment, and be willing to engage and debate and respect and indeed love those who differ from us. And that's not, something that applies in Black History Month or Women's History Month. That's every month. And there are those who have determined that it's politically expedient to drive us apart, to exacerbate our divisions, and to tear us down and tear our institutions down. And they will succeed if we let them. But I don't think they will succeed because I don't believe we will let them. I believe that each of us know that at the end of the day, we're all human beings of equal worth and common dignity in God's eyes. Whether you believe in God or not, we're all equal in terms of our value and our hopes and our aspirations. And we will all thrive if we see that commonality and pull together, or we can allow ourselves to be infinitely divided to the benefit of those who sow hate and those who want to see us fail as a nation. So I think that I remain an optimist because I know our history and I know who we are, and I know that those forces of division and hate, there's a strain that may be tapped into with that, but it doesn't represent the vast majority of us. And the only way it can represent the vast majority of us is if we let it. If we just give up. If we think the enterprise is sunk. Well, it's not even close. And we all have to prove to each other that we have each other's backs. Valerie?
Well, just don't underestimate the power you each have to be a force for good. And I think sometimes the challenges seem overwhelming and almost debilitating. And I have just seen ordinary people do extraordinary things all across this great country. And don't lose sight of your humanity and your ability to love and be compassionate and empathetic and be comfortable being uncomfortable. And remember that the young people are watching us. And I'm not very happy with what they're seeing right now. I don't think that the role models from the top are ones that I would want my grandchildren to emulate. And the best force against that is us. We, the people. We, the citizens, are in the most important office of all. And my takeaway from all of you is that Susan and I had an extraordinary experience working in the White House, and certainly April covering the White House, which is more challenging today, I think, than ever before, both personally, professionally, in terms of your safety as a reporter. You're under a whole different level of scrutiny. We all are. But that privilege is really no different than what each and every one of you have. If you take up that obligation and responsibility seriously. And so I ask you to love our country enough to want to be a part of changing it for the better.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out to this latest installment of Race in America. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Melissa, once again, for having us. Let's thank our guests. Susan Rice, the author of Tough Love, My Story, of the things we're fighting for.